HMS Amazon was a frigate of the Royal Navy. She served during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars under several notable naval commanders and played a key role in the Battle of Copenhagen under Captain Edward Raymead, when Raymead commanded the frigate squadron during the attack. After Raymead was killed during the battle, command briefly devolved to First Lieutenant John Quilliam. Quilliam made a significant impression on Rear Admiral Horatio Nelson, who appointed him to serve on the flagship HMS Victory, and Amazon passed to William Parker, who continued the association with Nelson with service in the Mediterranean and participation in the chase to the West Indies during the Trafalgar campaign. She went on to join Sir John Borlase Warren's squadron in the Atlantic and took part in the defeat of Charles Alexander Eliacuto and Durand Linois's forces, at the action of 13 March 1806. During the battle, she hunted down and captured the 40-gun frigate Bellepool. Amazon continued in service for several more years, being active in combating raiders and privateers, before being withdrawn from active service in late 1811. She was retained in ordinary until several years after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, when she was broken up. Construction and commissioning. One of two ships built to a design by Sir William Rule, Amazon was ordered from Woolwich Dockyard on the 27th of April 1796 and laid down that month. She was launched on the 18th of May 1799 and quickly put into service, having cost £33,972 to build, including fitting her out. She was commissioned in May 1799 under her first commander, Captain Edward Raymead. British waters and the Baltic. Raymead and the Amazon served initially in the English Channel, capturing the French privateer Bougainville on 14 February 1800. She was out of St. Malo, mounted 18 6-pounder guns, and had a crew of 82 men under the command of Pierre Dupont. The next day, she collided with Amazon and eventually sank, with the loss of one man drowned. Amazon sailed from Portsmouth, Jamaica with Seven and Scorpion on 26 April 1800 as escorts for a large convoy. Amazon would only accompany the convoy to a certain latitude. Raymead and Amazon were then assigned to Sir Hyde Parker's expedition to the Baltic in 1801, to compel the Danes to abandon the League of Armed Neutrality. Raymead worked closely with Parker's second-in-command, Rear Admiral Horatio Nelson, and Captain Thomas Foley in the lead-up to the Battle of Copenhagen, and Nelson duly appointed Raymead commander of the frigates and smaller vessels, instructing Raymead to deploy his ships in support of the main fleet. As the battle began, several of Nelson's ships of the line ran aground on shoals in the harbour, forcing the improvisation of a new plan of attack. As Nelson's ships engaged their Danish counterparts, Raymead took his frigates in to harass the Trecrona fort and block ships. Although the frigates were heavily outmatched and dangerously exposed, they maintained the engagement for several hours. The ships suffered heavy casualties, and a splinter hit Raymead on the head. At 1:15 p.m., Parker was waiting outside the harbour with the reserve and raised a signal ordering Nelson to withdraw. Nelson acknowledged the signal but ignored it, while Nelson's second-in-command, Rear Admiral Thomas Graves, repeated the signal but too did not obey it. Raymead now found himself in a difficult position, too junior an officer to risk disobeying a direct order. He remained in action for a further half an hour before reluctantly giving the order for his small squadron to withdraw. Withdrawing forced his ships to turn the sterns to the Danish guns, thereby exposing the most vulnerable area. When HMS Alcmene and then HMS Blanche withdrew, this reduced the thick cloud of gun smoke that was helping to obscure the British ships and left Amazon exposed to the full force of the Danish guns. Lieutenant Colonel William Stewart, commanding the soldiers of the 48th Regiment, recorded that Riau was killed, was sitting on a gun, was encouraging his men, and had been wounded in the head by a splinter. He had expressed himself grieved at being thus obliged to retreat, and nobly observed, "What will Nelson think of us?" His clerk was killed by his side, and by another shot. Several Marines, while hauling on the main brace, shared the same fate. Riau then exclaimed, "Come, then, my boys, let us all die together." The words were scarcely uttered, when the fatal shot severed him in two. Command of Amazon devolved to her first lieutenant, John Quilliam, who completed the withdrawal. Nelson went aboard the badly damaged Amazon after the battle and asked Quilliam how he was doing. Quilliam replied, "Middlin'," a response that apparently amused Nelson and may have contributed to Nelson's subsequent appointment of Quilliam as first lieutenant aboard HMS Victory. Parker and Nelson. Mediterranean command of the Amazon then passed to Captain Samuel Sutton, who was succeeded the following year by Captain William Parker. Under Parker, Amazon captured the 16-gun privateer Felix on the 26th of July 1803, and survived a brush with the French fleet off Cape Capet on the 2nd of May 1804. Amazon was one of the ships to take part in the Trafalgar campaign the following year, serving with Nelson in the Mediterranean. On one occasion in December 1804, Nelson ordered Parker to bring a consignment of live bullocks to supply the fleet off Toulon. The Amazon was a notably smart ship, and had just been repainted, so presumably the instruction to convert his ship into a floating farmyard was not received with much enthusiasm. Parker duly returned with a shipment, prompting Nelson to inquire with gentle humor, "Well, Parker, of course he would not dirty the Amazon for much for anything. Have you brought 12 1/2, or a dozen?" Parker had in fact brought 60 bullocks and 30 sheep, prompting Nelson to promise a reward for his good service. Parker and the Amazon remained with Nelson after the division of the Mediterranean Command left the Spanish coasts under the supervision of Sir John Order. Nelson suspected that Order was intercepting his dispatches and commandeering Nelson's frigates to use himself. Nelson therefore ordered Parker not to stop for any of Ord's ships if this was possible. Parker attempted this but was intercepted by HMS Eurydice. He was however able to convince the Eurydice's commander, William Host, to turn a blind eye, and having delivered his dispatches to Lisbon, acted on Nelson's hint that he was not expected back until February by carrying out a cruise that netted him several prizes worth a total of £20,000. Order complained about the poaching taking place on his station, but the prize money went to Parker and Nelson. West Indies and Atlantic. Amazon went on to join Nelson in the chase to the West Indies and back during the Trafalgar campaign. During the voyage across the Atlantic, Nelson wanted to pass on specific instructions to his captains about how he wished to engage the French, but did not want to lose time by ordering his ships to heave to. Instead he gave the plans to Parker, who was described by Pulteney Malcolm as the best frigate captain in the service, and Parker sped along the line in Amazon, delivering the instructions so efficiently that the fleet lost hardly a yard of ground. Once more in European waters after the fleet's return, Amazon captured the Spanish privateer Príncipe de la Paz off Ushant on the 17th of September 1805. Príncipe was armed with 24 9-pounder guns and 4 swivels. Her crew of 160 men, under the command of Captain François Bec, were principally French. She had been out 5 weeks and had captured the packet Prince of Wales from Lisbon, and the letter of marque Lady Nelson, which had been sailing from Virginia to Glasgow. Part of Lady Nelson's crew was aboard Príncipe, as was a considerable amount of specie. Amazon was back in the Atlantic in 1806, this time as part of Sir John Borlase Warren's pursuit of Jean-Baptiste Philibert Willaumez, when Warren's fleet unexpectedly encountered a separate French fleet under Charles-Alexandre Élie-Couteau and Durand Linois. Amazon became involved in the resulting action of 13 March 1806. During the battle she hunted down and captured the 40-gun frigate Bellepool in a running engagement. The Amazon lost 4 killed and 5 wounded during the engagement, while the Bellepool lost 6 killed and 24 wounded. Amazon captured the 14-gun privateer General Perignon on 21 January 1810, and Captain John Joyce succeeded Parker as captain in May. Joyce captured the 14-gun privateer Cupidon on 23 March 1811. Fate. In December 1811, Amazon was laid up at Plymouth. She paid off the following year and saw out the remainder of the Napoleonic Wars in ordinary. HMS Amazon was finally broken up at Plymouth in May 1817.